Hi, everyone. Welcome to NCEA. My name is Dr. Brianna Asmus. I'm the ESL and Bilingual Program Director at Aquinas College in the School of Education there. And today I'm going to talk to you about a course I created. And that course centers around supporting English language learners in remote learning environments. My email address is down at the bottom of this first slide. I would love it if you would reach out to me. I will be able to add you actually to the course that I'll be talking about today. If you include a Gmail address, a non-institutional Gmail address, so a personal Gmail address, to me in the email. In the course, then you'll be able to see all the materials that we're talking about, kind of how I structured it. So feel free to reach out. And I'd also love to know your thoughts because I know a lot of schools of education across the country were creating courses like this and looking for ways to best support their language learners. So this is by no means a comprehensive kind of overview of this topic, which is so broad, but rather kind of more just an example of something that I was able to do at our school. So I hope that it helps you in some way and maybe gives you some ideas on this topic. So, first, I wanted to present you with some terms. You may already be familiar with these, but one interesting thing I found when I was designing this course, which was for teachers, uh, was that actually these terms have changed over time. So, for the means of today, remote learning is when a faculty member, a teacher, opts either by necessity or by choice to take their face to face class suddenly online. So the class wasn't necessarily designed to be an online or even a hybrid course in some cases. And so oftentimes, the teacher, faculty member will conduct synchronous classes via a video conferencing platform like Zoom, Google Meet, and then the instructor and students will interact that way, also known as synchronously. So they're meeting at the same time and talking together. And that's kind of like much as we would do in an actual classroom, right? Where we're going and meeting in one place and talking to each other. So for online learning, the meaning is more that the course was designed for the online format. So usually there's a learning management system associated with that. Um, for example, Google Classroom, Canvas, Desire to Learn. These are all learning management systems. And the content is all housed online. This could even include things like textbooks, like ebooks, lectures, things of that nature. Both of these formats can be synchronous or asynchronous, so those terms could apply to either or. And also, the term distance learning, which you may have heard, could also encompass both of these. There's likely a lot of other terms that you've heard, like high flex, for instance, was something that kept coming up for us where, we're letting students kind of choose whether they want to come in or they want to do more of a, you know, asynchronous or synchronous online format. But for the purposes of this topic anyway today, these are the ones that may come up. Um, So, when I started to offer this course to teachers, they're all from seven different districts, actually, around the Grand Rapids area, diocese teachers included. I heard a lot of stories, right? This was in the very beginning of the pandemic. So, remote learning was the thing that was taking place then, right? Because all the courses, classrooms suddenly moved online. And in some cases, this happened at multiple points throughout the pandemic, depending on geographic location. Some schools went back and forth several times. And so it was very hard for, teachers obviously to build an effective class that was able to take into account, how the students would be meeting and interacting and so forth, things that are really foundational to building any kind of course. And so this is kind of what was termed pandemic teaching, right? Like we kept hearing, it's not really online teaching or remote teaching, it's more pandemic teaching. Like this is an emergency. We have to move all this stuff now. We have to get all the kids online now. We have to get them iPads. We have to, X, Y, and Z. And so support, obviously, especially for language learners, was scarce since support systems often take time to put into place. And also because they're generally designed with majority learners in mind in terms of needs. So we made this assumption, that all of the students had computers already and they all had internet access already. And, um, teachers have been saying this for years, obviously, that, we knew that they didn't have these things. But suddenly, everybody was realizing that we can't just like move the classes online if students don't have access to the basic components that they need in order to be able to learn in that way. And so, through no fault of their own, teachers, they were not prepared, of course. Many of them had never taught online at all. They had never taught an online course. Um, Teachers, who had been in the classroom for decades, never necessarily had to do anything like this. And so there was a steep learning curve there. And so, luckily, in the School of Ed at Aquinas, we were able to step in because we actually have some partnerships supported also by grant funds. We are very blessed to have those funds. And so we saw a need that kind of fit with some of the goals of our grant. And so we were able to say, okay, let's build this course. Like, let's get it up, let's get it running. An online course for teachers who are already in the classroom who right now are trying to think about the best ways to support their language learners. And so I started putting together this course and we ran it 3 times. So we had about 150 participants. They got credits, credentials for their credentials in our state of Michigan, that's Sketch credits. And then they could also get college credits for it as well. And that those were covered by the grant. So it was offered for free to them. And we were very surprised actually how quickly the course filled both times. Despite teachers being very, very busy at this time, perhaps the busiest they had ever been, they still had a very strong desire to learn these tools and to do what they could to support their learners. That was no surprise to me because I know how awesome teachers are, having been a K-12 teacher myself. But it was really nice to see that. So, so I thought like a teacher in designing this course, and I also thought about, I started with their needs in terms of thinking about what would they need to effectively teach language learners in a remote or online environment, depending on the timing. So I created a course in Google Classroom, which a lot of them were already familiar with. I found out several of the districts were already using that or had just kind of bought into that, and so that was also an incentive. Like they wanted to learn how to use Google Classroom, so that was part of it as well. But that was my online management system. Within there, I created, some resources, links, an announcement section. I made sure that the course navigation was clear and easy, that it wasn't overwhelming. So in some ways, I was thinking of it less as a college course, but more a course that, in its design could be, like meant for high school students or middle school students. And content, obviously, the content was for teachers, but I was thinking about how I could integrate all these tools that they could also use in their own remote classrooms. I included, course norms, meeting norms as well, along with academic expectations and supports that really focused on their own ease of use. So, anyway, I was trying to model essentially like what they should do to support their English language learners. And so, I really focused in the course on the intersection of English language learners and their remote learning needs. Toward the beginning of the pandemic, it was actually not necessarily an easy thing to research. There really wasn't a lot out there, and what was out there was often for like teaching overseas or contexts that weren't pandemic teaching, where we had to really think about equity and other aspects that wouldn't normally have to. So a lot of the content I was creating myself, and then as the second and third iterations of the course came out, I was able to, kind of fold in things that had been coming out in terms of this topic, supporting language learners remotely. So that was nice. But essentially, we'll take a look at the course here in a second. But what you'll see is that it includes resources that are mostly folded or scaffolded into a hyperdoc format. So if you're not familiar with hyperdocs, we'll take a look. You can kind of see one of those. I think hyperdocs are just fantastic to use with English language learners because they they have like a predictable structure. Students can work at their own pace. There's lots of plugins that can be used with them in terms of translation plugins, reading plugins, audio plugins. Um, if you haven't looked at some of the plugins for like Google Chrome or really any browser, generally there's different types that you can use that can support students who have a variety of levels in terms of language learning. And I made sure, to have them exposed to different types of resources that maybe they weren't familiar with. One of them is what I'm using right now, which is Screencastify, basically recording my screen to do a little lecture presentation. I also included surveys, slide decks, mini lectures. Really, the rule is, for a course that doesn't meet synchronously, to really never have more than like, 5 to 10 minutes in terms of per lecture. So they kept those pretty short. Articles, audio and video files, all sorts of different written texts, blogs, academic journals, opinion pieces, all sorts of stuff there. Examples from the field in any format, really. And then also content and grade specific materials. So I'll show you one of the hyperdocs, but I was often giving options since I had teachers from kindergarten all the way up through high school. And some of them, it's their first year of teaching. Ooh. And others, had been in the field for a long time. Some had, maybe 70% ELs in their classroom. Others maybe had one or two. So there were all different situations I was trying to be cognizant of when I was planning the course. Again, just like you would thinking about language learners, right? That is such an all-encompassing term. And it's quite frustrating, um, you know, oftentimes to those of us in the field because it kind of like lumps lots of groups together. So I tried to keep those things in mind. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to switch windows here and move over to the Google Classroom. But also, if you would like to be added to this Google Classroom, again, send me an email and either send it from a personal Gmail, not institutional, like mine, or a put it in the email, and I will add you to the course so that you can personally, take yourself through the course and see all the links, make copies of the materials if you like, and so on. So bma004 at aquinas.edu is my email address. So now I'll switch over here. And so this is it. This is my course. Um, this is the more recent iteration of it. And so this one ended December 4th, yeah, of 2020. Um, Google Classroom's kind of nice because it has this stream where you can post announcements. And you can also, as you see, like tag um, students in it as well. Um, Sometimes, at this time in particular, you're getting buried in emails. So things like that are kind of nice. They can also ask questions in the stream. Other students can answer it. I can post additional resources, things like that. There's a meet link as well in case they wanted to meet with me, even though we didn't have synchronous meetings. There were a couple options at different times where they could meet with me and to discuss different things. So now I'll go to the Classwork tab and just kind of orient you to this. First of all, for some of them, it was their first time using Google Classroom. And so I included some resources here that allow them to become familiar with Google Classroom. One's a slide deck, and one is a video that my colleague, Stephanie Boutelaire, who actually is our Google educator at Aquinas, made some of these. And I also want to give her credit because if it weren't for her, I really wouldn't have felt confident in creating a classroom in Google Classroom. So I did include a syllabus. It was pretty, condensed version of what I normally do. And, all the assignments and things are built into the course, but this also includes my contact information and other things, lays out the assignments as well. And then the first thing that the teachers did were introduction activities. They completed a survey essentially about their familiarity when it comes to teaching language learners online. If you want, you can take this survey as well. It's still open. But basically, you get a score and it will, give you some indication of maybe how ready you are. Some of the questions are like, do you have this equipment? Do you have a reliable computer? Things like that. Those were issues for teachers as well. Do you have a space, in your home dedicated to working? And some of them are more focused on the needs of language learners. And so again, kind of that meeting of those two topics. All right. Um, so there's also a way that they can introduce themselves through Google Slides here. There's a course navigation video that I created. That's a screencast like this. Um, in the video, I just take them through the structure of the course. Again, great thing to do for language learners as well. Ideally, I would have uploaded this video if this course was for language learners to YouTube because of the closed captioning potential on YouTube. You can also make YouTube channels private or only visible to certain groups of people. So a lot of people think that if you post something on YouTube, everybody can see it. And that's not the case anymore. You can, do the same things that you do with Google in terms of like, only people who have the link can get to this, and otherwise it's not going to appear to other people generally. So I do have a YouTube channel as well where I have lots of videos listed. When I was teaching language learners, that was super important. You can also slow the speed of the video, do the closed captions. So there's lots of potential there as well. Sometimes people have issues with logging in and stuff, so there's a video for that as well. The bulk of the course is organized into hyperdocs, as I mentioned. So these essentially are Google Docs, or in some cases, slides, um, that contain a variety of readings, resources, and activities. And so I'll show you just one of these so you can kind of get an idea for it. They all have kind of like a different theme or different aspect of, supporting language learners in remote environments. So this particular hyperdoc kind of starts off with a screencast, and in the screencast, it kind of interrogates Bloom's taxonomy a little bit. It's actually just me talking about that, and to remember that that taxonomy can be fluid for language learners, and then like they might not stay at one point, and then a list of tools for them to check out. So the theme of this hyperdoc is essentially, like creation and how important it is to get students to that level where they are creating. And so as teachers, I'm having them, check out these tools and then kind of play around with them a little bit. And then imagine, how they could integrate other resources. There's some things here about like fair use and copyright and things like that. And then having them pick a couple of them, go into a little more depth about the tools that they picked, a few more resources, and then basically they get to create something. So they could create a Pix, a Chatterpix, or a Powtoon, or any of the tools basically that were mentioned in this particular hyperdoc, a Thinkling or a Deck Toys. So if you hadn't heard any of those, you can go and check them out. It's kind of fun. And yeah, so essentially that's how this one is structured. We can take a look at another one as well. So with each of them, they have to make a copy of their own, and then basically they fill it out. They go through the activities and then turn it back in to the Google Classroom. This one is talking about culturally responsive teaching in remote environments. And so there is an opportunity for them to read some articles that take notes in different ways. It's often some, options that we don't think about offering students. Watching a screencast about working culturally responsive elements into the foundations of their course design. And then considering their own experiences, thinking about how they could do the same. There's a webinar. There's another hyperdoc embedded in the hyperdoc. This one gives some options in terms of learners. So there's like one for advanced learners, one for like a whole class environment, or where the teacher's leading the hyperdoc, and one for like one-to-one teaching. So again, thinking about their different situations. And then there is also some examples or some models. And then one thing that they can do in this one is opt to create a choice board. So that's kind of fun. Um, there's also a flip grid as well. A lot of teachers are really into this tool right now, allowing you to give short little video responses to things. So, yeah, go back to the course. And so feel free to go through these hyperdocs, check out the resources. They all, again, center around this topic of supporting language learners in remote environments. Hopefully, not too many of the links are broken, but if you come across one, let me know. That's one thing about creating a course like this that, happens a lot. There's also like a final assessment here that kind of hits on some of the main aspects of the course. That is open as well. If you want to take it, feel free. The questions generally come from the things that were in the hyperdocs, the readings in particular. And then there's some fun stuff here as well. There's an remote classroom challenge that basically asks the teachers to do one thing every day that can help them in creating a remote classroom. So I'll show you what that looks like. So basically, they would make a copy of this. And then in the first week, the first thing is to reflect on your results from the survey that I showed earlier. Do some organizational stuff, looking at their technology. Okay, now think about student access. So you've thought about your own access. Now think about student access. What do you feel is the main barrier? So there's some that are more reflective. Other things are, look at a new game that you could play with your students online, rework maybe a parent or a communication style that you use with students with a focus on clarity. So there's all these different daily challenges, and then they get to the end of the 30 days. Going back to the other assignments, there's also a family engagement plan. This idea came from a PD that I did 2 years ago, I believe now. And it's basically kind of it can be a broad plan or it can be more specific. A lot of them ended up finding out that their district already had some kind of family engagement plan, but maybe it was a little broad and they needed it to be more specific for their learners in their classroom. Others found that there was no family engagement plan actually for their district at all, or that maybe that they were creating it at the time. And so there's actually been a lot from the state that's come out on this topic lately too, in our state of Michigan, maybe your state as well. And so I did make a video on this topic. So if you're interested in that, you can watch it. Again, it's, kind of a general overview. And then I gave them a template and then they were able to create their own plans. And in fact, I have one pulled up here that was Jill Annabelle's. And so she actually had been already drafting something. And so this is a really, really nice example that she made here, very specific about the different types of family engagement and how the diocese were addressing those. Okay. And then let's see. Okay. And then this is my area for additional resources as well. So, I guess if I were to give homework, I would say, because I don't have time to talk about all of the things included in the hyperdocs here, and those really more specifically focus on the topic of this course. So feel free to explore those. Again, um, send me an email, bma004@aquinas.edu. We're bringing it up on the screen right here. And I will be happy to add you to the Google Classroom there, and you can explore these resources on your own. It's definitely, a topic that's here to stay, I think, and it's one that we've learned a lot about in the past year plus. So I'd also be happy to have a conversation. So reach out and thank you for listening today. And I hope you have a good rest of your conference. Thanks so much.